Hello, everybody. It's Kathy Kuntz at Cool Choices. We're about ready to start our webinar today on electric vehicles. I thought I'd start today with a poll just to get a sense of folks' experience with this. So let me just quickly launch the poll. We've still got folks logging in, it looks like, but in the interim, if you're on the line, you can just indicate your experience with electric vehicles. That'll give me a sense of sort of who we're talking to today and give everyone a little bit of a sense of who's in the audience. So I'm going to let that run for a minute or two here while folks fill it out. It looks like we've got pretty close to everybody on the line voting. If you haven't voted, vote in the next second or so, and then I'm going to close the poll and I'll share it, and then we'll start talking about things. Okay, terrific. Close, share. Well, I'm starting to become like technically competent at this. So it looks like we've got a mix of folks. A little bit over half of the folks on the phone work for organizations that are promoting electric vehicles, which is terrific. It's really, you're the folks who I'm definitely talking to today. And certainly folks who are trying to convince their own company to purchase electric vehicles. And then we've got some owners in the room. So that's terrific. That's going to help maybe truth test some of what I talk about through this. So excellent. Let me switch that off and get back to the presentation. So again, I'm Kathy Kuntz. I'm the Executive Director of Cool Choices. We're a nonprofit in Wisconsin, and we primarily do behavior change work. So we work with companies and communities to encourage folks to adopt sustainable practices. We're really in the culture change piece of the universe. And one of the primary ways we do that is through an online engagement tool where, akin to a corporate wellness program, we run a corporate sustainability program where people join teams and compete to adopt sustainable practices at work and home, really with the aim of illustrating how there are shared values across the organization around sustainability and getting everyone to talk about these things. In the work we do, we've long paid attention to transportation. And really our focus in a lot of ways has been on encouraging people to think about driving less and certainly driving smarter. So thinking about their use of speed and other sorts of things. At the same time, we've also encouraged people certainly over time to explore electric vehicles. And exploring electric vehicles, making a vehicle choice are, after all, also behaviors. Plus, this is an area of personal interest to me. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it really got us thinking about how it would be useful to share our behavioral insights with folks thinking about electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are important right now because transportation is now 28% of the U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. So a significant piece of our emissions are coming from the transportation sector. And the more we can electrify vehicles while we're also transitioning to cleaner electricity, the more effectively we reduce those emissions. And reflecting the importance of EV, there's a lot of talk out there right now about initiatives. You know, you've got states doing things, you've got cities doing things, and you've got countries doing things. Norway is a really fun example. In December of last year, more than 50% of all new cars sold in Norway were electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids. So they're like on this very fast path to electrifying their fleet. As a point of comparison, we're at about 1% in the US of vehicle sales are electric vehicles or plug-in. So we've got a long way to go in this. We've got definitely kind of an uphill challenge to get folks into electric vehicles. And of course, whenever we think about how do we get people to do something different than what they've done before, we kind of go back to the fundamentals of what we've seen works at Cool Choices. And so today I'm going to really give you some food for thought around how how you make it fun, social, and easy for people to adopt electric vehicles, whether that's part of their corporate fleet or is their kind of personal transportation option. So on that, let me say maybe a little bit about fun, social, and easy before I leap into this. When we talk about fun, we're really meaning that the new choice you're making, the change you're making, is more pleasant than what you were doing before. So fun can come in a lot of varieties. It can literally be fun, like playing cool choices, or it can feel good in some way. It can make you proud of yourself. It can make you have more status, etc. Social is really shorthand for the recognition that humans are social creatures, and a lot of what we do is influenced by what people around us are doing. So we take a lot of cues from our peers. And then easy is maybe the most self-explanatory. If we want people to do something different, we need to reduce the friction to doing something different. We need to make it easy for them to do that. So, okay, fun, social, and easy. We'll start with fun. I already alluded to this. One of the ways EVs address fun is the status factor. And really, Tesla is the epitome of this. So you've got this super cool, high-tech auto company that's building, expensive sports cars. Having a Tesla is a status symbol. That feels good. That's fun, kind of thing. I think there's a huge opportunity, and right now largely a missed opportunity in the broader market for other auto manufacturers to be framing their electric vehicles as fun to drive too. I mean, after all, electric vehicles have more pep than internal combustion engine vehicles typically. There's more torque there. They are fun to drive. And more companies could kind of leverage off that. Another way to think about making this transition fun is really through these test drive events. And I know lots of entities have been playing with this idea a little bit of giving people an opportunity to drive an electric vehicle, to poke an electric vehicle. One of the things that happens when people test drive an EV, this is a shot from somebody's video of a test drive, and the driver's responding to the pep in that vehicle. She's surprised at how much get up and go. I think this is a Chevy Bolt she's driving. How much oomph it's got. When thinking about these events where people can kind of poke the tires and look at vehicles, I think an important piece of this to remember is that it can be really stressful, not fun, to shop for cars in a traditional way and go to a dealership and have to give someone a bunch of information about you, and they're going to keep calling you and all of that, versus I get to go to maybe my community's Main Street days, and there are a couple of EVs parked at the end of the street. And I can try driving them. I can talk to people who own them. This isn't as stressful. It's kind of cool. I get to get an experience with this. I walk away with a story I can tell my friends about how I drove that cool new car. It's fun. It's also giving me exposure, potentially, to other people in my community who are already choosing EVs. And notice, I'm having those EVs at the Main Street days. I'm not doing just a special event about EVs, because that will only draw people who are already pretty interested in EVs. I want you showcasing EVs at all kinds of events in your community where people are getting together because they're celebrating the 4th of July, or they're celebrating some community festival kind of thing, or the county fair. Those are all really good places to catch regular folks and introduce them to the idea that people just like them are driving EVs. And again, I'm leading into that social piece here, and how important it is that we see evidence that other people just like us are doing this. One of the really good ways to give people a sense of how people like them are doing this is via social media. There are really a lot of social media groups out there already around electric vehicles that people can join and talk to other people who own vehicles, talk to people who've owned sometimes multiple vehicles. At our house, so I'll talk about in a bit, we have a Nissan Leaf, and my husband spent a lot of time researching electric vehicles. He probably watched, I don't know, 400 hours of YouTube videos from around the world of different EV kinds of things. And he did join all of these Facebook groups and soon made me join a bunch of the Facebook groups. And it gives you this sense that there's this whole cohort of people who are doing this, who are part of things. And again, that's this really important social cue. The kind of a way to think about this is tribal marketing. Seth Godin, a marketing expert, talks about this, that, and his kind of catchphrase is, people like us do things like this. So there's a way that I belong to a cohort of folks who are concerned about the environment, who commute short distances, who do whatever is my sort of vision of my group. And as I see my group adopting things, there are social cues for me to adopt those things too. Now, the trick about that is that I need to see what my group is doing. So this is a great EV picture because it says pure electric under the e-taxi thing, and it says e-taxi all over. And if this vehicle drove by me on the street, I'm pretty sure I would know it was electric. But I'm not really a car person. Okay, if a vehicle drives by and you say, hey, did you see that car? I might say, the red one? You know, I know the difference between an SUV and a car, but really, that's about the level of my interest. Which means I tend not to see the electric vehicles in my community. As we were thinking about this at our house, increasingly, my husband we'd be driving somewhere and he'd say, well, there was a Tesla, or there was a Leaf, or there was a Bolt. I'm like, nope, didn't see it. And it really made me think about this challenge that if we want to leverage social cues, we need to make sure those electric vehicles are visible, not just to the car geeks, the folks who see a vehicle go by and not only know what make and model it is, but probably know what year it is. But we also need to make it work for people like me who don't pay that much attention to these things. Part of the solution I came up with, this is actually a picture of our Leaf, and included here is this cool sticker I found online, because I felt like people needed to know this was an electric vehicle, and that if I didn't notice them, why would they? Kind of thing. I was gratified recently. We were in a restaurant and the Leaf was parked outside out a window that we had a view of from our table. And I saw this group of people walk by and someone sort of started and they all came back and stood around the vehicle. And I was like, look, they saw the sticker. That's how they knew that was an electric vehicle. They're now thinking, oh, people who eat at this restaurant we eat at drive an electric vehicle. We're giving them some social norms in a more overt way than they were getting them before. There's an opportunity to think about how you help people. If you want more people to adopt electric vehicles, how are you helping them see the electric vehicles in your community? I think there's a lot of opportunity here around labeling. The other place visibility really matters is at dealerships. So, you know, when you go into a car dealership, very typically the prominent vehicles are kind of the fancy new model, the thing they're showcasing, and it matters where the EVs are in their inventory. Are they somewhere way in the back of the lot? Or are they prominent? Because that says this is a thing we're really excited about selling, or, yeah, we maybe have one, let me try to remember where we put it. And certainly for those of you involved in promoting EVs, and We know there are challenges dealing with dealerships around this. I saw this quote last week from Mary Nichols on the California Air Resource Board. We've an interesting situation right now. We've got auto manufacturers globally, Ford and General Motors, talking about huge EV lineups coming out in the next few years. Volvo talking about everything being electric in the next 2 years. So at the manufacturing level, there's this race to be electric, but we're not seeing dealerships, particularly in the Midwest, embrace that quite as quickly. Now, Mary notes that that's at their peril. As a behavior person, I say, well, we never talk about the scary thing that could happen to you if you don't do this behavior, because that makes people want me to go away. Instead, I always want to talk about the good thing that can happen if you do this behavior. So I would frame a conversation with a dealer about there's this global change happening in vehicles, and some dealerships are going to get ahead of that and be the dealerships that are selling EVs in a prominent and effective way, and they're really going to be the ones who survive and thrive in the next decades. So thinking about how to frame that so that a dealer goes, oh, I want to do that. Not, Kathy should shut up, I've been selling cars a long time. At least we would hope. The other piece of this is really to think about, if you're promoting EVs at a local level, how do you recognize the dealerships that lead? And again, I know that I've talked to folks promoting these, and when I say, how are you recognizing the dealerships that lead, sometimes the response I get is none of them are leading. It's frustrating. I'm like, somebody is doing a little something more effectively than some others. Maybe one dealership is providing more consistently the information about how utilities interact with home charging stations than other dealerships. Maybe it seems like one dealership is selling more EVs than another. Finding a little win that you can showcase, that you can highlight, call out, congratulate, is really important. And, we talk about this a lot in our webinars, this power of positive reinforcement. So if I'm a utility and I want my service territory to adopt more electric vehicles, and I call out Carl's Auto Sales for doing a great job of making sure his customers know about the incentive I have on home charging stations, two things happen when I call out Carl's. First, the other dealerships notice that. And they think, well, why didn't we get called out? And it's a good nudge for them to do a little bit better. The second thing that happens, that we often forget happens, is Carl hears me call him out and feels a need to live up to that accolade. So now Carl's going to make sure his salespeople are even more thorough about talking about charging stations, because he doesn't want there to be a customer who says, well, that's not my experience at Carl's. So we get these dual wins. We get everyone else trying, and we get Carl trying even harder when we do some call-outs. And doing call-outs is really important, because dealerships are one of the keys to electric vehicles being easy. We're in an early stage of the electric vehicle market, which means that we're dealing with early adopters. We're dealing with people who are seeking information on their own about EVs, who are proactively out there figuring things out. Again, my husband, hundreds of hours of YouTube videos, all kinds of blogs and things he was reading. By the time we were going to dealerships, he knew way more than most of the salespeople about electric vehicles. As an informed buyer, I expect an informed seller. And this is a challenge right now for the dealerships. Very often what we see happening in dealerships is I had this experience at multiple dealerships. I would walk in and say, I'm interested in test driving a Bolt, test driving a Leaf. They would say, oh wait, let me find the salesperson who deals with the EVs. And you know, part of my response to that is, oh, is there only one salesperson here who deals with pickup trucks? Of course not. You all sell pickup trucks because that's like a big market in Wisconsin for you to sell. I want you to think the same way about EVs. Everybody can know about this. It's an easy technology. When you say, oh, there's only one person who knows about that, it sounds like this is pretty complicated. And they're not working today, so now there's no one who knows anything about it. And you're making it harder for me to move forward to a purchase, which prompts me to go to another dealership. So really thinking about, okay, how do we help create those informed sellers that make it easy for buyers to have a good experience at the dealership? Because really, that's the hardest part of the EV transaction. When it comes to the other things, I mean, easy is baked into electric vehicles. We're talking about a transition from an internal combustion engine with some 2,000 moving parts to a battery-powered car with 20 moving parts. So it's no more fuel injection, no more catalytic converters, no more all that stuff that used to potentially go wrong with my car. Now I worry about windshield washer fluid and tire pressure. It's unbelievably easy. And again, we need to talk more about that. There's this burden of ongoing maintenance that comes off that is pretty empowering. It's also easy to refuel an electric vehicle. I've been plugging things into the wall since I was a child. I charge my phone every day. I understand how this works. This is a really intuitive thing, and we need to think, I think it's really important. The phone analogy is a really powerful one. People have a device that they use all the time that they watch the battery load of. This works the same way. All of the same rules apply. Battery longevity is based on how you use the phone. Very intuitive. Tied to this is, so overall that's really intuitive, but unfortunately right now what I see in the market, this is the thing that makes me the craziest about what folks are doing out there, is a ton of talk about how there aren't enough charging stations, a ton of talk about range anxiety. And from a behavioral perspective, when we focus on a problem, that problem becomes everyone's problem. So when I say 9 out of 10 plastic water bottles aren't recycled, people hear nobody recycles water bottles, and even fewer water bottles get recycled. Those statements become sort of take on a life of their own and perpetuate the problem. Part of what we need to really think about here is how are we addressing the problem versus perpetuating it. So when I Googled lack of charging stations and got 14.5 million results, I was like, this seems really problematic to me. Because in reality, the problem is not that substantial. In reality, in the U.S., the average commute is less than 40 miles round trip a day. A new EV will have a range typically of 120 miles per charge or more. 40 is definitely less than 120. Now, if it was 40 miles a day and the EV got 45, say, yeah, we should be worried that a bunch of people are stranded at the side of the road without a charge. But we're not in that scary of a math. But when we focus all of our attention on the EVs in charging infrastructure we're going to need in 2035, we're giving people anxiety that they don't need about this. We're making it hard instead of making it easy. In reality, most people charge their EVs at home overnight. Was recently at an event where someone said to me, "Oh, just like I do my phone." I was like, yes, exactly. Just like you do your phone. In the same way we do not have a crisis that people routinely lack electricity for their phone, most people are not going to have a problem charging their EV. And really, maybe a way to think about this is it's not that much different than any other technological innovation. When cars were first having computer systems inside the combustion engines, it meant that mechanics needed whole new training to deal with those cars. You did not see the auto industry saying, "Oh, we're selling these new cars with computers in them, and if they all break down tomorrow, there won't be enough mechanics to fix them." Why would they create that noise in the market to thwart themselves? Yes, we want to address the charging infrastructure, but that's not really a thing we want on the front page every day when we're also trying to get people to move to electric vehicles. So, enough on that. You get my point. The last thing I want to point out here is really that particularly on the range point, for fleets where their vehicles are predictable, whether that's buses or delivery vehicles, it's even more easy to ensure that the charge is adequate for what's needed. So there's a ton of opportunity there too to make this really easy. To also give you an enormous amount of data typically. Typically with EVs, you're getting a lot more data about how those vehicles are driven just embedded in the vehicle. So, to accelerate EV adoption, let's all make it more fun, social, and easy to buy and drive EVs. With that, I think I want to open it up for questions. So, as usual, you've got that GoToWebinar box on the side. If it's closed, the orange arrow will open it. And then there's a spot where you can put questions in, and I'll just see what folks have to say there about what they're wondering about with EVs. Give you a second. Well, I'm also watching our time where clearly I went a little longer than I often do today. What is the expectancy of the typical EV? Are there any state? Oh, sorry, I'm reading two questions at once. Sometimes this question box is like, so life expectancy of the typical electric vehicle. So we're talking about a technology that's about 10 years old now. The thing that needs replacement potentially is the battery. And of course, batteries get cheaper over time. There's a lot of good resources online about this. I don't want to cite something that I don't get exactly right, so I would send you to some of that data out there. But definitely, I mean, again, because the only thing that kind of can go wrong in that is the battery, you've got a more manageable sort of thing. And certainly in the social media groups, I see people still driving 2011 and 2012 electric vehicles and reporting good battery life on them. So the other question is, are there any state policies that might help speed adoption? So certainly some states have done tax incentives around electric vehicles, and that can help to some extent. There's kind of growing research that car purchasing, like so many other decisions we make, is based on a lot of things besides economics. As a person who thinks about behavior, I would go, of course, it's not just economics. It's which vehicles feel safe to me, which vehicles reflect my values. So in some ways, I would argue that states, instead of maybe policies, need to be thinking about bigger communications campaigns that showcase these vehicles work in our state. These vehicles are fun to drive. They're good for the state in various ways. Maybe the one state policy that I would mention is states should not create penalties for electric vehicles. So for example, here in Wisconsin, we essentially pay a penalty for driving an electric vehicle when we license our vehicle, compared to states where you pay a lower fee for driving an electric vehicle. We pay a higher fee. And so that's like kind of a perverse penalty that I don't think helps move the market, in the sense that it just doesn't make it easy. It doesn't send a signal that this is a thing that the state thinks is a good idea. Having some discount on the fee suggests the state thinks it's a good idea. Having some showcasing suggests the state thinks it's a good idea. Potentially, and I haven't maybe given this enough thought, but I would be intrigued by the potential for a state policy that could encourage dealerships to stock electric vehicles. Because I think there's a chicken and egg problem in some parts of the Midwest. Dealerships aren't getting very many electric vehicles, which means salespeople aren't selling them and are concerned that they might not get another one. So they're sort of dissuading people from thinking about the EV because there's not one on the lot. And that can certainly kind of thwart things moving forward. Remember years ago, my experience when, there was a Prius waiting list, and I went to a Toyota dealership where because there was a waiting list, the salesperson tried to convince me I really wanted something else. And I walked out and bought a Prius at another dealership because that salesperson wasn't listening to me at all. They were just thinking, oh, I bet I can convince her that this other car is just as good, and then I'll make the sale today, which isn't what happened. So thinking about how you help them maybe get more access might be an interesting thing to think about. I'll ponder that some more. Looking at our time, I want to be respectful. I'm a little bit over. That usually doesn't happen. Thanks so much. You've got my email. Feel free to reach out to me and we can compare notes. A bunch of you are EV drivers, so I'd love to hear your own experiences about how it's fun, social, and easy. Thanks so much for joining us today, and have a good rest of your week.